The rain hammered against the windshield of the 2007 Honda Civic as Maya Torres navigated the crumbling streets of Camden, New Jersey. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and she was returning from her second job, the overnight shift at St. Mary's Hospital, where she cleaned rooms and emptied trash bins while doctors and nurses saved lives. Her first job, daytime receptionist at a dental office, barely covered rent. This one paid for everything else: groceries, utilities, her daughter Sofia's school supplies, the endless parade of expenses that came with single motherhood. She was 34 years old and exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. It was a bone-deep weariness that came from 3 years of grinding poverty following a divorce that had stripped her of everything except Sofia and her dignity. Her ex-husband Derek had been a financial advisor, charismatic and ambitious, who had convinced her to sign papers she didn't fully understand during their marriage. When he left her for a younger associate at his firm, those papers ensured she walked away with almost nothing while he kept their Montclair home, their savings, everything they had built together. The apartment she shared with Sofia occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse, $890 a month for 600 square feet with windows that rattled in the wind and pipes that groaned through the night. But it was theirs, and it was clean, and Maya had painted Sofia's room a cheerful yellow that made her daughter smile even on difficult days. She parked in the building's lot, carefully avoiding the potholes that could swallow a tire, and climbed the 3 flights of stairs. Inside, Mrs. Chun from 3B was watching Sofia, as she did 4 nights a week in exchange for Maya watching her grandson on weekends, the informal barter economy of people who couldn't afford traditional childcare. "She's asleep," Mrs. Chun whispered, gathering her knitting. "Good as gold, that one. Did her homework without being asked." Maya pressed 2 $20 bills into the elderly woman's hand, money she could barely spare, but insisted on providing. "Thank you, Mrs. Chun. I don't know what I'd do without you." After the older woman left, Maya stood in the doorway of Sofia's small bedroom, watching her daughter sleep. At 8 years old, Sofia had her father's dark curls but Maya's determination, a fierce intelligence that her teachers said would take her far if given the chance. Maya was determined to give her that chance, whatever it took. She was heating leftover rice and beans when her phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize. Subject line: Estate of Margaret Elena Torres. Maya stared at the screen, her heart stuttering. Margaret Elena Torres had been her grandmother, a woman she'd met exactly 3 times in her life, the last when Maya was 12 years old. The email was from Whitman and Associates, attorneys at law, requesting her presence at their Philadelphia office the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. for the reading of Mrs. Torres's will. Maya had to read it twice to confirm what it seemed to be saying. Her grandmother, who had cut off contact with Maya's mother decades ago for reasons never fully explained, had left her something in her will. She thought of calling her mother, then decided against it. Elena Torres lived in Arizona now, remarried to a man who managed a resort in Scottsdale, and their relationship had always been complicated by financial strain and mutual disappointment. Better to find out what this was about first, then decide whether to mention it. Tuesday arrived with the weight of impossible expectations. Maya had requested the afternoon off from the dental office, claiming a doctor's appointment, and taken the train to Philadelphia with Sofia in tow, unable to afford a babysitter for the trip. The law office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in Center City, so far removed from Camden's grit that it felt like entering another country. "I'm Maya Torres," she told the receptionist, acutely aware of her discount store blouse and the scuff marks on her shoes. "I have a 2 o'clock appointment." The receptionist smiled professionally and directed her to a conference room where an older man in an expensive suit waited. He introduced himself as Robert Whitman, senior partner, and gestured for her to sit. Sofia settled beside her, earbuds in, absorbed in a library book. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Torres," Whitman began, opening a leather portfolio. "I'll be direct. Your grandmother, Margaret Elena Torres, passed away 6 weeks ago at the age of 89. She left specific instructions regarding the distribution of her estate." Maya nodded, trying to imagine what her grandmother might have owned. She remembered the woman as severe and distant, living in a narrow row house in Philadelphia's Fishtown neighborhood, surrounded by old furniture and the smell of mothballs. Margaret's primary asset was her row house, which has been sold as per her instructions. The proceeds, after estate taxes and fees, amount to approximately $47,000, which has been divided among several charities she specified. Whitman paused. To you, she left what she called the Philadelphia property, along with a personal letter. He slid a deed across the table. Maya picked it up, reading the description. One commercial structure and associated land, totaling 0.8 acres, located at 1847 Moyamensing Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Formerly the Philadelphia Branch Mint, constructed 1901, operations ceased 1969, condemned 2003. I don't understand, Maya said slowly. She left me a condemned building? The property has been sitting and used for decades, Whitman confirmed. The city assessed it at $900 for tax purposes, basically land value minus the cost of eventual demolition. Your grandmother purchased it at a tax auction in 1985 for $2,200 and maintained minimal property tax payments since then. Maya felt something deflate inside her. For a moment, she'd allowed herself to hope for something that might change her circumstances, a small inheritance, enough to create a cushion against disaster. Instead, she had a derelict building that would cost money to maintain and eventually demolish. There's also this, Whitman said, handing her an envelope with her name written in spidery handwriting. Margaret left instructions that you were to read this in private, after understanding the nature of the bequest. Maya accepted the envelope, her throat tight. Is there anything else? No. That concludes the estate distribution. The deed will need to be filed with the city, and you'll be responsible for property taxes going forward, approximately $180 annually. If you choose to reject the bequest, simply sign the declination form, and the property will revert to the city. She looked at the form he slid toward her, then at the deed. $900 property, $180 annual taxes, and whatever problems came with owning a condemned building in a city she couldn't afford to visit regularly. The smart choice was obvious. I'll take it, she heard herself say. Whitman's eyebrows rose slightly. You're certain? The property has no immediate value and comes with ongoing obligations. I'm certain. After signing the necessary documents, Maya took Sofia to a fast food restaurant nearby, the only meal she could afford after the train tickets. While her daughter ate chicken nuggets, Maya opened her grandmother's letter with trembling fingers. My dear Maya, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have accepted the burden I placed upon you. I call it a burden because that is what it appears to be, a worthless building, a financial liability, something any sensible person would reject. The fact that you accepted it tells me something important about who you are. You do not remember me well, I know. Your mother and I had our differences rooted in choices I made long ago that I could never explain to her. But I have watched you from a distance, through occasional reports from people who knew people. I know about your marriage, your divorce, your struggle to provide for your daughter. I know you work 2 jobs and sleep 4 hours a night. I know you have refused to give up. The mint building I have left you is not what it appears. In 1985, I had reasons to purchase it that I could never make public. Your grandfather, Antonio Torres, worked at that mint from 1952 until it closed in 1969. He was a die engraver, one of the best, trusted with delicate work on commemorative coins and experimental designs. When the mint closed, something was left behind, something that powerful people believed was destroyed, but which Antonio had hidden, protected, kept safe for decades. I have never accessed what he left there. The risk was too great, the danger too immediate. But I have maintained the property, kept the taxes current, waited for the right moment or the right person. I believe you're that person, Maya. I believe you have the strength to decide what should be done with what you will find. Go to the building at dawn. The security code for the rear entrance is 081556, my wedding date. In the basement level, behind the 3rd furnace from the east wall, you will find a steel door. The key is taped to the underside of the bottom desk drawer in what was once the superintendent's office on the main floor. What lies beyond that door has been sealed since November 1969. It represents a truth that certain institutions have spent half a century concealing, a truth worth more than money, though it happens to be worth a great deal of money as well. I cannot tell you what to do with what you discover. That choice must be yours alone. But I can tell you this. Your grandfather died believing that some secrets should eventually come to light, that truth deferred is not truth denied, only truth waiting for courage. You have that courage, Maya. I saw it in your eyes the last time we met, when you were just a girl. You asked me why I lived alone, why I didn't talk to your mother, why everything felt sad in my house. I couldn't answer then. Perhaps what you find will answer for me. Be careful. Be wise. Trust your instincts. With love I could never properly express, your grandmother, Margaret. Maya read the letter 3 times while Sofia finished eating and started on her homework. Each reading brought new questions, more confusion. Her grandfather had hidden something in a closed mint building, something valuable enough that her grandmother had maintained a worthless property for 30 years without accessing it, something connected to powerful people and institutional concealment. It sounded absurd, the fantasy of an elderly woman who had spent too much time alone. Yet the letter's tone was lucid, specific, grounded in concrete details. The security code, the basement furnace, the superintendent's office, these were not the vague directions of someone disconnected from reality. Mom, Sofia looked up from her math worksheet. Are you okay? You look weird. Maya forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about Grandma Margaret, the one we never met. We met her a few times when you were very little. You don't remember. Sofia considered this. Did she leave us money? She left us something. I'm not sure what yet. That night, after Sofia was asleep and the apartment was quiet except for the usual sounds of pipes and neighbors, Maya researched the Philadelphia branch mint on her laptop. It had been established in 1901 to handle the increasing demand for coinage, operating continuously until 1969 when production consolidated at the main Philadelphia Mint. The building had been used for storage briefly in the 1970s, then abandoned, falling into disrepair until the city condemned it in 2003. She found architectural drawings from the original construction, photographs from its operational years showing men in work aprons standing beside massive machinery, a few articles about preservation efforts that had failed to generate sufficient funding. The building was a forgotten piece of industrial history, architecturally significant, but economically worthless in a neighborhood that had seen better days. But none of that explained what her grandfather might have hidden there, or why her grandmother had kept it secret for 3 decades. Maya made a decision. She would go to the building. She would check the basement. She would see for herself whether her grandmother's letter was truth or delusion. If there was nothing there, she would sell the property to the city for whatever they'd pay and use the money to buy Sofia a new school clothes. If there was something, well, she'd deal with that when it happened. The following Saturday, Maya borrowed Mrs. Chen's car, a 1998 Toyota Camry that complained but ran, and made the 40-minute drive to Philadelphia with Sofia. She'd packed flashlights, work gloves, and a crowbar, unsure what condition the building would be in. Moyamensing Avenue ran through a neighborhood in transition, some blocks showing signs of revitalization with new restaurants and renovated homes, others still caught in decay. The Mint building stood on a corner lot, a 3-story brick structure with neoclassical details that hinted at former grandeur. Bars covered the windows, graffiti marked the lower walls, and chain-link fencing surrounded the property, topped with rusting barbed wire. Maya parked across the street and studied the building. It was larger than she'd expected, easily 30,000 square feet, with Philadelphia Branch Mint still visible in faded letters above the main entrance. The rear entrance her grandmother had mentioned was accessed through a service alley, also fenced off but with a gate secured by a simple padlock. Stay in the car, Maya told Sofia, gathering her supplies. Mom, this looks dangerous. I'll be right back. Lock the doors. The padlock yielded to a few strikes with the crowbar, clearly not designed to withstand actual force. Maya slipped through the gap, pulse hammering, feeling like a criminal despite owning the property. The rear entrance was a steel door, badly weathered, with a numeric keypad that looked like it hadn't functioned in years. She tried the code anyway. 081556. Nothing happened. She tried it again, pressing harder, and heard a click inside the mechanism. The door opened. Inside, the air smelled of mold and abandonment. That particular odor of places where time has stopped and decay has begun its patient work. Maya's flashlight beam cut through darkness, revealing a corridor lined with offices, their doors hanging open, their contents long since stripped by scavengers or removed by the last legitimate occupants. She made her way toward what her grandmother's letter had described as the superintendent's office, following a faded floor plan painted on the wall near the entrance. The office was in the building's northeast corner, a larger room with windows overlooking what had once been the production floor. The desk inside was metal, government issue from a bygone era, its surface covered in a layer of dust thick enough to write in. Maya tried the bottom drawer. It was locked. She used the crowbar again, forcing it open with a screech of protesting metal. Inside, beneath old files and yellowed papers, she found what she was looking for, a key taped to the underside of the drawer bottom, exactly as her grandmother had described. It was old-fashioned brass, with a circular head and a complex bit pattern. The basement stairs descended into deeper darkness, each step creaking under her weight. Maya's flashlight revealed a vast underground space, the original mechanical room where furnaces and boilers had once powered the mint operations. The equipment remained, hulking shadows in the darkness, silent witnesses to decades of abandonment. She counted furnaces from the east wall. 1, 2, 3. Behind the third, a section of brick wall looked different, newer mortar, slightly different brick color. Maya approached it, running her hand along the surface until she found what she was searching for, a seam, barely visible, outlining a door. The key fit smoothly into a lock hidden at waist height. She turned it, heard tumblers engage, and pushed. The door swung inward, revealing a small room, perhaps 12 feet square, sealed and dark. Maya stepped inside, her flashlight sweeping across walls lined with metal shelving. And on those shelves, stacked in precise rows, were wooden crates. Dozens of them, each stamped with the Treasury Department seal and marked with dates ranging from 1952 to 1969. Maya approached the nearest crate, her hands shaking as she lifted the lid. Inside, packed in protective cloth, were coins. Not ordinary coins, but specimens in pristine condition, each in its own protective sleeve. She lifted one, a silver dollar that caught the light from her flashlight and seemed to glow. She opened another crate. More coins, these older, some she recognized as rare commemoratives. Another crate held what appeared to be experimental dies and design plates. Another contained coins that looked like they'd never seen circulation, each one perfect, each one carefully preserved. Maya's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. This wasn't a random collection of pocket change. This was something else entirely, a systematic assembly of specimens, errors, rarities, prototypes. Her grandfather hadn't just worked at the mint. He had preserved examples of nearly everything it had produced over 17 years. She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped it, and searched rare U.S. coins value. The results overwhelmed her. A 1964-piece dollar, never officially released, recently sold for $108,000. A 1970 small-date Lincoln cent in perfect condition, $3,000. Experimental designs that never made it to production, priceless to collectors. And she had crates of them. Dozens of crates. Maya's legs gave out, and she sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by wooden boxes that might contain a fortune, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what her grandmother had left her. This wasn't just valuable. This was potentially life-changing wealth, generational wealth, the kind of money that could erase every debt, fund Sofia's education through graduate school, provide security for the first time in Maya's adult life. But her grandmother's letter had mentioned danger, powerful institutions, concealment. Why had this collection been hidden? Why had her grandfather felt the need to seal it away? And more importantly, what would happen when she tried to claim it? She heard a sound from above, footsteps on the main floor. Maya's heart seized. She'd left Sofia in the car, alone. She shoved the coin back in its crate and closed the lid, then crept to the basement stairs, flashlight off, moving by feel through the darkness. The footsteps continued, slow and methodical, someone searching. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Another scavenger? Someone who had seen her break in? The police? She reached the bottom of the stairs and froze. Two figures were visible in silhouette against the light from the open rear door. Men, both tall, both moving with purpose. One was speaking into a phone. Building secure. No signs of recent entry. Target is probably planning to return at night. Target. They were talking about her. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She backed away from the stairs, retreating into the basement shadows. Her mind worked frantically. They knew she would come here. They'd been waiting for her, or watching the property, or somehow monitoring her movements since she'd claimed the inheritance. She pulled out her phone, keeping the screen brightness at minimum, and texted Sofia. Lock all the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me. Stay down low. If anything feels wrong, call 911 and run to the restaurant across the street. The response came immediately. Mom, what's wrong? Just do it, please. I'm fine. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Maya knew she couldn't go back upstairs, but the basement had to have another exit. Old buildings like this always had multiple egress points, especially industrial facilities where fire code required it. She swept her flashlight across the space, keeping the beam low, searching for doors, hatches, anything. There, on the far wall, a metal ladder leading up to what looked like a coal chute, the kind that would have been used for deliveries when the building's furnaces were operational. Maya climbed it quickly but quietly, testing each rung before trusting her weight to it. At the top, she pushed against the metal hatch. It didn't budge. She pushed harder, bracing her feet against the ladder, and felt it give slightly. One more push, and it swung open, dumping her into an alley on the building's west side, far from where she'd parked. Maya scrambled to her feet and ran, circling around the block to approach Mrs. Chen's car from a different direction. Sofia's frightened face appeared in the window, relief flooding her features when she saw her mother. Drive, Maya said, sliding behind the wheel. Now! She pulled away from the curb as the two men emerged from the building's rear entrance, scanning the street. One of them pointed toward the car, speaking urgently into his phone. Maya turned at the next corner, then another, weaving through the neighborhood's grid of streets until she was certain they weren't being followed. Only then did she allow herself to process what had just happened. Someone knew about the coins. Someone had been watching the building, waiting for her to show up. And whoever they weren't planning to just ask nicely for what she'd found. Her grandmother's warning echoed her mind. Be careful. Be wise. Trust your instincts. Maya's instincts were screaming that she was in over her head, that she'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple inheritance. But they were also telling her something else, that the coins in that basement were worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth whatever risk came with claiming them. She drove back to Camden in silence, Sofia wisely not asking questions, and spent the rest of the day researching coin collecting, numismatics, and illegal issues surrounding discovered currency. What she learned both encouraged and terrified her. The coins her grandfather had collected, if they were what she suspected, could be worth millions, tens of millions, possibly more, depending on their rarity and condition. But claiming that value would require authentication, professional appraisal, and almost certainly legal documentation proving legitimate ownership. And that was the problem. Her grandfather had worked at the mint. These coins had presumably come from a mint. Even if he'd collected them legally, through legitimate channels available to employees, proving that 50 years later would be nearly impossible. Without proof, anyone could claim the coins were government property, stolen from the mint, subject to seizure and return to federal custody. That night, after Sofia was asleep, Maya returned to her grandmother's letter, reading between the lines for clues she might have missed. Something that powerful people believed was destroyed. A truth that certain institutions have spent half a century concealing. More than money, though it happens to be worth a great deal of money. Her grandfather hadn't just collected coins. He had documented something, preserved evidence of something the government wanted erased, and that evidence was somehow connected to the coins themselves. Maya made another decision. She would go back to the Mint building, but prepared this time. She would photograph everything, document the entire collection, and research each piece to understand what made it special. And she would do it before whoever was watching the building came back. She called in sick to both her jobs for Monday, claiming food poisoning. Mrs. Chun agreed to watch Sofia for the day in exchange for Maya watching her grandson the entire following weekend. Maya borrowed a better flashlight from a neighbor, packed her phone charger and a portable battery, and set her alarm for 4:30 a.m. The city was dark and nearly empty when she returned to Moya Mincing Avenue, parking 3 blocks away and approaching on foot from a different direction. No cars sat watching the building. No figures moved in the shadows. Maya slipped through the rear gate, which she'd left unlocked, and entered the building as dawn began to lighten in the eastern sky. The basement was exactly as she'd left it, the sealed room undisturbed. Maya worked methodically, opening each crate and photographing its contents. Some contained coins and obvious collector's sets, organized by year and denomination. Others held what appeared to be error coins, misstrikes and double dies, the valuable mistakes that collectors prized. Still others contained dies themselves, the metal plates used to strike coins, some marked experimental or prototype, do not release. And then she found the crate that changed everything. It was smaller than the others, reinforced with metal bands, and marked with a red stamp that read classified, eyes only. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather journal. Maya opened it to the first page and recognized her grandfather's handwriting, the same precise script she'd seen in old birthday cards her mother had kept. Record of Anomalous Productions, Philadelphia Branch Mint, 1952 to 1969. Compiled by Maya Torres, senior die engraver. She began to read, and the world her grandmother had hinted at finally came into focus. Maya sat on the cold concrete floor, the leather journal open in her lap, her flashlight casting a small pool of light in the sealed room. Her grandfather's handwriting filled page after page with meticulous entries, each dated, each describing coins that should never have existed. March 17, 1954. Received order for experimental nickel composition testing. Standard dies, but substrate contains 90% silver instead of standard copper nickel. Supervisor Martin instructed me to strike 500 specimens for metallurgical testing. Official records show 500 struck and melted. Actual count: 500 struck, 476 melted, 24 retained for quality assurance. Specimens stored in my personal collection under authorization code QA 54-117. The entry continued with technical specifications, chemical compositions, weight tolerances. Maya flipped ahead, scanning entries from different years, and a pattern emerged. Over and over, her grandfather described coins struck for testing, experimental purposes, or government evaluation, officially recorded as destroyed, but actually preserved in small quantities. November 8, 1961. Treasury Department Directive. All 1964 dated peace dollars to be struck as planned, then melted prior to release due to silver shortage concerns. Denver and San Francisco mints confirmed compliance. Philadelphia struck 316,076 specimens. Official melt count: 316,076. Actual melt count: 316,052. Discrepancy of 24 specimens documented as quality control samples under authorization QA 61-893. Maya's heart pounded as she understood what she was reading. Her grandfather hadn't stolen anything. He had operated under legitimate quality assurance protocols, retaining specimens of coins that were officially destroyed, documenting everything with authorization codes and supervisor approvals. But over 17 years, those samples had accumulated into a collection of coins that the numismatic world believed didn't exist. She photographed each page of the journal, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was documenting. There were entries about experimental alloys, trial strikes for commemorative coins that were never approved, error coins that should have been destroyed but were kept for engineering analysis. Each entry included authorization codes, supervisor signatures, and cross-references to official production records. The final entry was dated November 14, 1969, 2 weeks before the mint closed. Final entry. The Philadelphia branch closes its doors next week. I've been instructed to dispose of all quality assurance samples in my possession to ensure no specimens from experimental programs remain in circulation. I have signed documents confirming destruction of 847 items across 127 authorization codes. This is accurate. The items have been destroyed in the sense that they no longer exist in any official record. They are dead to the Treasury Department, to the Mint Service, to history. But they are not melted. They are preserved, sealed, and hidden where they will remain until someone with the wisdom to understand their significance could decide their fate. I do this not for personal gain, but because I believe history should not be erased to serve bureaucratic convenience. These coins represent American craftsmanship, metallurgical innovation, and the evolution of our currency. They deserve to exist, even if only in secret. If you're reading this, I hope you use this collection wisely. The authorization codes I have documented prove legitimate acquisition. The specimens themselves prove their own authenticity. But be warned, the institutions I serve do not appreciate light being shown on their deletions and omissions. Proceed carefully. Antonio Torres. Maya closed the journal and sat in the darkness, processing the implications. Her grandfather had created a perfect paper trail proving legitimate acquisition of coins worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. But he had also directly defied government orders to destroy them, which meant claiming this inheritance would almost certainly trigger legal challenges from the Treasury Department, possibly even criminal investigation. She heard a sound from upstairs and froze. Voices, multiple people, the creak of floorboards under heavy footsteps. Maya quickly tucked the journal into her jacket, closed the crate, and backed toward the sealed door. Through the gap in the doorway, she could see flashlight beams sweeping the basement. Check every room, every corner. The codes indicate she accessed the building yesterday. She found something, we just need to determine what. The voice was authoritative, male, with the crisp diction of someone accustomed to giving orders. Maya's mind raced. She couldn't be trapped down here. The coal chute exit was on the opposite side of the basement, but reaching it meant crossing open space where the searchers would see her. She made a decision. Moving as silently as possible, she pulled the sealed door almost closed, leaving just enough gap to see through, and waited. The flashlight beams grew closer, sweeping methodically across the basement's maze of old equipment. 3 figures, all wearing dark clothing, all moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. They reached the 3rd furnace. One of them ran his hand along the brick wall, found the seam, just as Maya had, and pulled out a key identical to the one she'd used. The door swung open, and they entered the sealed room, their lights illuminating the crates. Intact, one said. Looks like she saw it, but didn't take anything. She's smart then. Taking coins would have been theft. Looking is just trespassing. The 3rd figure, a woman, opened one of the crates and examined its contents. These should have been destroyed in 1985 when Margaret Torres purchased the property. The directive was clear. Why the delay? Because Margaret never accessed the room. We've been monitoring it for 38 years, and she never once tried to open it. The collection was effectively neutralized by her inaction. Until she left it to the granddaughter. Until that, yes. They were silent for a moment, the weight of their failure hanging in the air. Then the first man spoke again. We need to accelerate the timeline. The building is condemned. We file for emergency demolition, claim structural instability, and have this room buried under controlled collapse within 72 hours. The granddaughter can't prove what was here if there's nothing left to find. Maya's blood ran cold. They were planning to destroy everything, to bury the evidence literally under tons of rubble and brick. And if she's already documented the collection, photographed the coins, Then she has photos of alleged government property allegedly hidden in a condemned building by her grandfather who allegedly violated mint protocols. Without physical evidence, it's her word against Treasury Department records, showing complete destruction of all experimental specimens. Who do you think people will believe? They had thought of everything, anticipated every move she might make. Maya fought down panic and forced herself to think clearly. She needed the coins, yes, but more importantly, she needed her grandfather's journal. With the authorization codes and documentation it contained, she could prove legitimate acquisition even if the coins themselves were destroyed. The three figures spent another 10 minutes examining the collection, cataloging crate numbers, and taking their own photographs. Finally, they left, sealing the door behind them and ascending the basement stairs. Maya waited until she heard the rear entrance close, then counted to 100 before moving. She couldn't take the coins, not all of them, not even a significant portion. They were too heavy, too numerous, and removing them would prove she'd been here, had taken government property. But she could take evidence. She could take proof. Working quickly, Maya selected 3 coins from different crates, each one documented in her grandfather's journal with specific authorization codes. A 1964-piece dollar, one of the 24 specimens her grandfather had retained. An experimental nickel from 1954, struck in the silver substrate her grandfather had described. And a prototype commemorative half-dollar from 1968, designed for a program that was canceled before release. She wrapped each coin carefully in cloth, tucked them in her jacket pockets, and secured the journal in her inner pocket. Then she opened one crate completely, dumping its contents slightly to make it obvious someone had been here, had accessed the collection. Let them wonder what she'd taken. Let them worry. Maya climbed the coal chute ladder and emerged into the gray light of early morning. She walked the 3 blocks to her car without looking back, forcing herself to move at a normal pace, just another person on their way to work in a city that was waking up around her. She was halfway back to Camden when her phone rang. A Philadelphia number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, then decided that pretending ignorance wouldn't help her situation. Hello, Ms. Torres. This is Robert Whitman. I apologize for calling so early, but I've received an unusual inquiry regarding the property you inherited from your grandmother. Maya's grip tightened on the steering wheel. What kind of inquiry? The Treasury Department's Office of the Inspector General has contacted my firm requesting information about the transfer of the Moya Avenue property. They're claiming the building may contain government assets that were improperly secured during the Mint's closure in 1969. I see. I want to be clear, Ms. Torres. The property is legally yours. The deed is filed, the taxes are current, and Margaret Torres owned it free and clear for 38 years. But if there are government assets on the premises, the situation becomes complex. Have you accessed the building yet? Maya thought carefully before answering. I visited the property once. It's a derelict building full of old equipment. I didn't remove anything. Did you observe anything that might be considered government property? Mr. Whitman, I'm a dental receptionist, not a mint expert. I have no idea what would or wouldn't be considered government property. There was a long pause. I understand. Ms. Torres, I would strongly advise you to retain separate legal counsel, someone who specializes in property rights and government asset recovery. This has the potential to become quite complicated. I can't afford a lawyer, Mr. Whitman. I can barely afford my rent. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Well, for the moment, I would advise you not to visit the property again without legal representation. And if anyone contacts you claiming to represent the government, verify their credentials thoroughly before providing any information. The call ended, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and the 3 coins weighing heavy in her pockets. She drove the rest of the way to Camden on autopilot, her mind working through scenarios and contingencies. By the time she reached her apartment, she had formed the skeleton of a plan. She needed 3 things: authentication of the coins to prove their value and her grandfather's documentation, legal advice she could afford, and somewhere safe to store what she'd taken. The first was easy enough. There were numismatic experts who would authenticate coins for a fee. The second was harder. The third made her think of someone she hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years. Marcus Webb had been her father's best friend, a relationship that had survived her parents' divorce and her father's death from a heart attack when Maya was 16. Marcus was a jeweler now, semi-retired, running a small shop in South Philadelphia that specialized in estate jewelry and coin collections. He had the knowledge to understand what she'd found, the connections to help her navigate the numismatic world, and most importantly, a safe that could protect what she'd taken. She called him from her car, rehearsing what she would say. "Webb's fine jewelry," his familiar voice answered. "Marcus, it's Maya. Maya Torres." "Maya? Good Lord, it's been years. How are you, sweetheart? I need your help. I found something my grandfather left, and I don't know what to do with it." "Antonio left you something? I thought he passed years ago." "He did, but my grandmother kept it for him." "Marcus, I need to show you something, but I need you to promise you won't tell anyone." "Not yet." His voice changed, becoming serious. "Come to the shop. I close at 6. Come at 6:30 and use the back entrance." That evening, Maya drove to Marcus's shop with the coins and journal wrapped in a towel in her bag. Sofia was with Mrs. Chun, doing homework and eating leftover dumplings, safe and unaware of the storm gathering around them. Marcus Webb at 72 looked like an aging boxer, broad-shouldered and silver hair with hands that remained steady despite arthritis. He locked the shop's back door behind Maya and led her to his workbench, where jewelers' tools and magnifying equipment covered every surface. "Show me," he said simply. Maya laid out the 3 coins and a journal. Marcus picked up the piece dollar first, examining it under a magnifying loupe, his breath catching. "This can't be," he muttered. The 64 piece dollars were all melted. Every single one. "Apparently not," Maya said. He moved to the experimental nickel, then the commemorative half-dollar, his hands beginning to shake. Finally, he opened the journal and read her grandfather's entries, his expression shifting from disbelief to something like awe. "Maya," he said finally, "do you understand what you have here? Coins worth a lot of money. These 3 coins alone are worth close to $1 million. If they're authentic, and I believe they are, you're holding specimens that collectors would pay literally anything to own." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "But you said there were more. How many more? Dozens of crates. Maybe hundreds of individual coins. My grandfather documented everything in that journal. Authorization codes, production numbers, compositions. It's all there." Marcus sat down heavily, still holding the piece dollar. "This is bigger than money, Maya. This is numismatic history. These coins prove that the Treasury Department lied about destroying experimental specimens. That opens questions about what else they might have lied about, what other rare coins might exist in government vaults or private collections. The Treasury Department wants them back," Maya said. "They're planning to demolish the building, bury everything." "Of course they are. Because if this collection becomes public, every collector, every historian, every lawyer representing families who sold silver coins to the government during the shortage, they'll all start asking questions. The implications are enormous." "So what do I do?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "First, we authenticate these specimens properly. I know people, certified coin graders who can verify authenticity and assign condition ratings. Second, we document everything in that journal, create copies, put the originals in a safety deposit box. Third, we get you a lawyer, a real one, not the estate attorney, someone who specializes in government seizure cases." "I can't afford." "I'll pay the retainer," Marcus interrupted. "Your father was my best friend, Maya. Antonio was a good man who believed in doing the right thing, even when it cost him. If he preserved this collection and trusted your grandmother to keep it safe, then there's a reason. We're going to figure out what that reason is, and we're going to make sure his legacy doesn't get buried under a pile of bricks." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. The government doesn't like admitting mistakes, and they really don't like private citizens proving they lied. Are you prepared for that?" Maya thought about Sofia, about the life they were living, paycheck to paycheck, always one emergency away from disaster. She thought about her ex-husband Derek in his Montclair mansion, about the way he'd looked at her when she signed the divorce papers, like she was worth less than the furniture they were dividing. She thought about her grandmother, maintaining a worthless property for 38 years, waiting for someone strong enough to claim the burden and the gift it represented. Yes, she said, I'm prepared. Over the next week, Maya's life split into two parallel tracks. During the day, she worked her jobs, cared for Sofia, maintained the appearance of normal struggle. At night, she worked with Marcus to document and authenticate the collection, operating in secret, taking every precaution against discovery. The coin grading service Marcus recommended sent representatives to his shop, experts who examined the three specimens with scientific precision. They tested metal composition, measured die characteristics, compared details against known examples from the era. Each test confirmed what Antonio's journal claimed. These were legitimate mint products struck under official programs, documented with authorization codes that matched Treasury Department records. The 1964 piece dollar graded MS, 68, near perfect condition, with an estimated value of $450,000 to $600,000 at auction. The experimental nickel, unique in composition and strike quality, was valued at $175,000 to $250,000. The commemorative half dollar, a prototype for a canceled program, was estimated at $200,000 to $300,000. Three coins, carefully selected from crates containing potentially hundreds more. Maya tried to calculate the total value and couldn't. Even conservative estimates put the complete collection in the hundreds of millions of dollars, enough to transform not just her life, but generations of her family. But claiming that value meant fighting the United States government, and the government was already moving. On Wednesday, Maya received a certified letter from the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General, formally notifying her that the Moya-Mensing Avenue property was under investigation for possible storage of federal assets. The letter demanded she preserve any materials found on the premises and forbade their removal or sale pending completion of the investigation. She took the letter to Marcus, who had already retained a lawyer, a sharp woman in her 50s named Caroline Chun, who specialized in government seizure cases. Caroline read the letter once, then looked up with a grim smile. "This is actually good news," she said. "How is this good news?" Maya asked. "Because they're using civil administrative procedures rather than criminal warrants. That means they're not accusing you of theft. They're claiming the coins are federal property that needs to be recovered, which means the burden of proof is on them to demonstrate federal ownership, not on you to prove legitimate acquisition. But my grandfather took the coins from a mint. Your grandfather retained quality assurance samples under documented authorization protocols," Caroline corrected. "Every coin in that collection is cross-referenced to official production codes. The government will argue those codes authorize retention for testing and evaluation only, not permanent possession. We'll argue that in the absence of specific destruction orders, retention under quality assurance provisions constituted legitimate acquisition." Maya's head spun with legal terminology. Will that work? It might. It's unprecedented, which cuts both ways. But we have something they don't expect: documentation. Most seizure cases involve people who can't prove how they acquired what the government wants. You can prove exactly how your grandfather acquired everything, with codes and signatures from mint supervisors who are long dead, but whose authorization remains valid. So we fight them. Caroline hesitated. Fighting the federal government is expensive, time-consuming, and psychologically exhausting. They have unlimited resources and infinite patience. Even if we win, the legal fees alone could consume whatever value you realize from the collection. You need to decide if this is worth it. Maya thought about her grandmother's letter, about the courage it had attributed to her. She thought about Sofia, growing up watching her mother work 2 jobs and still struggle to make ends meet. And she thought about her grandfather, carefully documenting everything for decades, trusting that someday someone would have the strength to bring his preservation into the light. "It's worth it," she said. That decision, made in Caroline Chin's small office on a Wednesday afternoon, set in motion a cascade of events that would transform Maya's life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The first complication arrived on Friday evening. Maya was leaving the hospital after her night shift when a man approached her in the parking garage. He wore an expensive suit, carried himself with the confidence of wealth, and smiled with perfect white teeth that had probably cost more than Maya's car. "Miss Torres? I'm Derek Townsend. I don't believe we've met, though I know your ex-husband quite well." Maya's stomach dropped. Derek had mentioned a Derek Townsend, a partner at his investment firm, someone who handled high-net-worth clients and complex asset management. What was he doing here at 6 a.m. in a hospital parking garage? "I'm sorry, but I'm very tired and I need to get home to my daughter. This will only take a moment." He handed her a business card. "I represent a consortium of private collectors who have heard about your recent inheritance. We'd like to make an offer for the Moya Mincing Avenue property and any contents therein." "How did you hear about that?" His smile widened. "Ms. Torres, when someone discovers a potentially valuable coin collection, word spreads quickly in certain circles. We're prepared to offer you $2.5 million cash for a complete transfer of the property and all rights to its contents. No questions asked, no government involvement, no legal complications." Maya stared at him. $2.5 million? A generous offer, considering the alternative is years of litigation with the Treasury Department that will cost you everything you have and possibly result in criminal charges. Take our offer, walk away wealthy, provide for your daughter, and let professionals handle the complicated questions about government ownership and legal status. It was tempting, frighteningly tempting. More money than she'd earned in 20 years, enough to buy a house, fund Sofia's education, never worry about bills again. All she had to do was sign over her rights and walk away. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course, but don't take too long. Our offer expires in 72 hours. After that, you're on your own against the federal government and whatever other parties become interested in your situation." He walked away, leaving Maya standing in the parking garage with his business card and a decision that felt impossible. She drove home in a daze, parked outside her building, and sat in the car while the sun rose over Camden. $2.5 million would change everything. But something in Derek Townsend's smile, in the way he'd appeared at exactly the right moment with exactly the right offer, felt wrong. If the collection was only worth $2.5 million, he wouldn't be offering that much, which meant it was worth more, possibly much more, and powerful people wanted to acquire it quietly before its true value became public. She texted Caroline Shun. "Had an interesting conversation this morning. We need to meet." By Saturday afternoon, Caroline had assembled what she called the team in Marcus Webb's jewelry shop. Besides Marcus and Caroline, there was Thomas Wu, a numismatic historian from the University of Pennsylvania, and James Rodriguez, a forensic accountant who specialized in asset valuation. Maya told them about Derek Townsend's offer. Caroline's expression darkened. "The consortium he represents is almost certainly connected to the same people who want the building demolished," she said. "They're offering you money to make you complicit in burying the truth. Once you sign over your rights, they'll destroy the evidence and claim they bought an empty building." "How can they do that if the coins are government property?" "Because the government wants the coins buried too," Thomas Wu interjected. "This isn't just about money. It's about maintaining the narrative that certain rare coins don't exist. If your grandfather's collection becomes public, it proves that narrative is false, which opens the door to challenges about other rare coins, other government decisions to destroy currency." James Rodriguez had been quiet until now, studying Antonio's journal through reading glasses. "I've been calculating potential values based on the entries here. Conservative estimate, assuming average condition and legitimate provenance for everything documented, this collection is worth between $400 million and $600 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Maya felt dizzy. "That's assuming you can sell it legally," Caroline added, "which requires winning the court case, establishing clear ownership, and getting the coins authenticated and graded. All of which takes time and money you don't have. So what do I do?" The team exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus spoke. "You go public. You announce the discovery before they can bury it. You show the world what your grandfather preserved and let public opinion force the government's hand. They'll destroy me, Maya said. Derek, my ex-husband, he has connections. If he finds out about this, he'll use every resource he has to prove I'm unfit to possess it. As if summoned by speaking his name, Maya's phone rang. Derek. She hadn't heard from him in 6 months, not since the divorce was finalized. She answered with shaking hands. Maya. His voice was smooth, practiced, the tone he used with difficult clients. I heard something interesting today. Something about you inheriting property in Philadelphia. From your grandmother you never mentioned during our marriage. What do you want, Derek? I want to help. For Sofia's sake, if nothing else. My partner Derek Townsend mentioned he made you an offer. I'm calling to strongly advise you to take it. Whatever you think you've found, it's not worth fighting the government over. Trust me on this. Trust you? Like I trusted you during our marriage. Don't be bitter, Maya. It's not attractive. You're a dental receptionist who cleans hospital rooms at night. You're not equipped to handle what you've stumbled into. Take the money, provide for our daughter properly, and move on with your life. The condescension in his voice, the casual dismissal of her capability, ignited something in Maya that had been smoldering since the divorce. Our daughter? You haven't seen Sofia in 4 months. You haven't sent a child support check in 3. And now you're calling to tell me I'm not equipped to handle my own inheritance. I'm calling to keep you from making a massive mistake. But if you want to be stubborn, fine. Just remember I warned you when this blows up in your face and Sofia suffers for it. He ended the call, leaving Maya trembling with rage and frustration. She looked around at the faces watching her. These people who had become unlikely allies in a fight she was only beginning to understand. He's going to try to take Sofia, she said quietly. If this gets public, if it becomes a media story, he's going to claim I'm an unfit mother, chasing fantasies instead of providing stability. He'll use it to get custody. Caroline shook her head. Not if we move first. Not if we control the narrative from the beginning. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Marcus, you know Jonathan Reeves at the Philadelphia Inquirer? She waited for Marcus's nod. Good, because we're going to give him the story of the decade. Over the next 48 hours, the team worked with a precision that left Maya breathless. Thomas Wu documented every coin in Antonio's journal, cross-referencing the authorization codes against Treasury Department records that were public through the Freedom of Information Act. James Rodriguez created a preliminary valuation report, conservative but defensible. Caroline drafted a legal brief arguing for Maya's clear ownership under quality assurance protocols. And Jonathan Reeves, investigative journalist who had won 2 Pulitzers for exposing government fraud, listened to their story with the intense focus of someone who recognized genuine importance. You're going to need protection, he said finally. Not just legal protection, physical security. When this story breaks, you'll have collectors, dealers, government agents, and who knows who else coming after you. Some of them won't be polite about it. I can't afford security. You can't afford not to have it. He made a note on his pad. I know people, former law enforcement, who do private work. They'll bill you after the settlement. What settlement? Reeves smiled. Ms. Torres, once the story is public, you'll have every major auction house and coin dealer in the world bidding for the right to represent you. You'll have lawyers offering to take your case on contingency because they know a victory means tens of millions in fees. You'll have museums begging for the right to display the collection. The only question is whether you're ready for what that means. Maya thought about Sofia, about the apartment in Camden, about the life she'd been living and the life that was suddenly possible. I'm ready, she said. The story broke on Sunday morning, front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer, with a headline that stopped hearts across the numismatic world. Hidden mint collection worth hundreds of millions discovered in condemned building. Reeves had written it perfectly, leading with the human interest angle. A struggling single mother inheriting what appeared to be a worthless building, discovering a grandfather's legacy hidden for 50 years. Then the expert analysis from Thomas Wu, the legal arguments from Caroline, the preliminary valuations from Rodriguez. But the centerpiece was Antonio Torres's journal. Reeves had photographed key pages showing the authorization codes, the mint supervisor signatures, the careful documentation of every specimen retained under quality assurance protocols. It was impossible to read those pages and conclude anything except that Antonio had operated within legitimate procedures, preserving coins that the government had planned to destroy, but which represented irreplaceable historical value. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, every major news network was covering the story. By evening, Maya's phone was ringing constantly with reporters, coin dealers, auction houses, lawyers, all want to be part of what was already being called the most significant numismatic discovery in American history. And the government's response confirmed everything Caroline had predicted. The Treasury Department issued a statement claiming the coins were federal property subject to immediate seizure. The Philadelphia office of the FBI opened an investigation into possible theft of government assets. A federal judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania issued an emergency order freezing all transactions related to the Moya Mincing Avenue property pending further review. But public opinion, for once, was on Maya's side. The story had everything people loved. The little guy against the government, hidden treasure, a working mother fighting for her family, and the revelation that powerful institutions had lied about destroying rare and valuable items. Social media exploded with support, legal defense funds appeared, and prominent coin collectors publicly backed Maya's claim to ownership. On Monday evening, Maya returned to her apartment building after another day of phone calls and meetings to find Derek waiting in the lobby. He looked less polished than usual, his tie loosened, his expression caught between anger and calculation. "You just couldn't take the easy way, could you?" he said. "The easy way? You mean taking a fraction of what it's worth so your partner and his consortium could steal the rest? You have no idea what you've done. No idea who you're dealing with. Then explain it to me." Derek glanced around the shabby lobby, lowered his voice. "The people who want that collection, they're not just collectors. They're connected to institutions that depend on certain narratives about rare coins being destroyed. If your grandfather's collection proves those narratives are false, it opens the door to lawsuits, investigations, audits going back decades. They will do anything to prevent that. Anything like bribing my ex-husband to pressure me to sell." His face flushed. "I'm trying to protect you. And Sofia. By threatening to take her away from me? That's what you told Derek Townsend you'd do if I didn't cooperate, isn't it? Use custody to force my hand. You can't prove that. I don't have to prove it. I just have to know it's true. And that tells me everything I need to know about whose side you're on." Derek's expression hardened. "You're going to regret this, Maya. When you're buried in legal bills and government seizure orders, and your daughter's been taken by child services because you've become an unfit parent obsessed with fantasy treasure, you're going to wish you'd listened to me." He left, and Maya stood in the empty lobby, feeling her resolve harden into something unbreakable. Let them come. Let Derek and the government and the mysterious consortium and anyone else who thought they could intimidate her into surrender. She had something they didn't. The truth, documented and undeniable, preserved by a grandfather who believed some things were worth protecting even at personal cost. That night, after Sofia was asleep, Maya sat at their small kitchen table and composed an email to Jonathan Reeves. It was time to escalate. Time to show the world not just that the coins existed, but what they meant. Time to go back to the Mint building one final time before the government could bury everything under demolition orders. "I'm ready to show you the complete collection," she wrote. "Tomorrow night, with full media coverage. Let's make sure they can't hide the truth anymore." She hit send and closed her laptop, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her like armor. The fight was only beginning, but for the first time since her divorce, since her grandmother's death, since inheriting a building she thought was worthless, Maya Torres felt powerful. And somewhere in heaven or memory or the eternal space where courage lives, her grandfather Antonio smiled. Tuesday morning arrived with the weight of history. Maya woke before dawn, her stomach tight with anticipation and fear. Today she would open the sealed vault to the world, document every crate and coin, and force the government to confront evidence they had spent 50 years trying to erase. Sofia was still asleep, curled beneath her yellow comforter, unaware that her mother was about to walk into a confrontation that could either secure their future or destroy everything. Maya kissed her daughter's forehead and left a note on the kitchen table. At an important meeting. Mrs. Chen will take you to school. I love you more than all the stars. Mom. The team assembled at Marcus Webb's shop at 6 a.m. Caroline Chun arrived with 2 associates carrying equipment for documenting legal evidence. Thomas Wu brought portable authentication tools and reference materials. James Rodriguez had 3 digital cameras and enough memory cards to photograph every item in the collection. And Jonathan Reeves came with a camera crew from the Philadelphia Inquirer, along with representatives from the Associated Press and CNN, who had requested access to what was being called the most significant numismatic discovery in modern history. The Treasury Department has filed an emergency motion to prevent us from accessing the building, Caroline said, reviewing documents on her tablet. They're claiming we're planning to remove federal property. The hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m., which gives us exactly 8 hours to document everything and get it into the public record before they can stop us. What if they show up before then? Maya asked. Then we have a very interesting confrontation on camera, Reeves said with a slight smile. The government seizing historically significant coins from a single mother who inherited them legally, all while multiple news organizations broadcast it live. Not exactly great optics for them. They traveled in a convoy of vehicles to Moya-Mincing Avenue. The street was already different from Maya's first visit. News vans lined the block, reporters doing stand-ups in front of the old Mint building, crowds gathering behind police barriers that the city had erected overnight. The story had captured public imagination in a way that transcended coins and money. It was about hidden history, government secrecy, and one woman's fight to claim her grandfather's legacy. Maya led the team to the rear entrance, her hand steady as she entered the code. 081556. The door opened, and they filed inside. Jonathan's camera crew capturing every moment. The walk through the abandoned building felt different with company, less eerie, more purposeful. They descended to the basement where morning light filtered through high windows, illuminating decades of dust and neglect. At the third furnace, Maya produced her key and opened the sealed door. The air that escaped still smelled of oil and old metal, preserved time capsule from 1969. She stepped inside, and the camera lights illuminated the wooden crates stacked in precise rows, each one stamped with the Treasury Department seal. Thomas Wu approached the first crate with reverence, carefully lifting the lid. His breath caught audibly as he saw the contents. Coins in protective sleeves, each one tagged with dates and specifications in Antonio's meticulous handwriting. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "These are 1955 double-die Lincoln cents. Error coins that should have been destroyed but were retained for quality analysis. Each one is worth $15,000 to $20,000 in this condition. And there are." He counted carefully, 32 specimens. The camera zoomed in as Wu lifted one coin, tilting it to show the characteristic doubled lettering that made these coins so valuable to collectors. Maya watched him work, photographing the coin from multiple angles, documenting its tag, cross-referencing it against Antonio's journal. They moved to the next crate. This one contained experimental silver quarters from 1967, struck as part of a test program before the Mint transitioned to copper-nickel-clad coinage. We'll explain for the cameras that these specimens were thought to have been completely melted, but here were 78 of them, each one proof of a program the government had claimed never reached production status. "Conservative estimate," James Rodriguez said, making notes. "These 78 quarters are worth approximately $8 million. That's just the second crate." They worked methodically, opening crate after crate while the cameras documented everything. The 1964 peace dollars that Maya had first discovered proved to be just the beginning. There were 24 of them, each one in near-mint condition, each one worth between $450,000 and $600,000 depending on exact grading. But surrounding them were other rarities that made even seasoned collectors gasp. A crate of 1943 copper pennies. The famous error where copper planchets intended for 1942 were accidentally used after the Mint switched to steel. Antonio's journal documented these, as metallurgical retention samples from the transition period. There were 19 of them. Modern auctions had sold similar specimens for $200,000 each. Experimental commemorative half-dollars from canceled programs, their designs beautiful and complete, but never released to the public. Pattern coins showing alternative designs that have been rejected, each one unique, each one priceless to collectors who studied the evolution of American coinage. And then Thomas Wu opened a crate near the back and froze. He stared at its contents for a long moment before speaking. "Maya," he said quietly, "you need to see this." She approached and looked inside. Nested in protective foam were coins unlike any she had seen before, larger, heavier, their surfaces gleaming with the unmistakable luster of gold. "These are 1933 St. Gaudens double eagles," Wu said, his voice barely above a whisper. President Roosevelt ordered all gold coins recalled and melted during the Depression. These $20 gold pieces were struck but never officially released. Only a handful are known to exist, and those that do are subject to government seizure because they were never legally monetized. He lifted one coin with gloved hands, tilting it in the light. The angel in flight design seemed to move, capturing light and shadow in a way that justified the coin's reputation as the most beautiful ever struck by the United States Mint. "How many are in this crate?" Maya asked. Wu counted carefully. 16 specimens. Each one documented in your grandfather's journal as quality assurance retention under authorization code QA 33-476. James Rodriguez had stopped taking notes, his calculator hanging forgotten in his hand. "Thomas, what are these worth?" In 2002, a single 1933 double eagle sold at auction for $7.6 million. That was one coin. Maya has 16 of them, all documented as legitimate mint retention under official protocols. If even half of these are deemed legal to sell, we're looking at, I can't even calculate it, 60 million? 80 million? Maybe more. The camera crew captured Maya's face as the numbers registered. She had known the collection was valuable, but this transcended her understanding of wealth. This was generational money, transformational money, enough to change not just her life, but the lives of everyone connected to her. "Keep going," Caroline said, her legal mind already working through implications. "We need to document everything before." The basement door at the top of the stairs slammed open. Heavy footsteps descended, multiple people moving with purpose. Maya's heart seized as 3 federal agents in dark suits appeared, followed by 2 more in tactical gear bearing Treasury Department badges. "Stop what you're doing," the lead agent commanded. He was tall and gray-haired, carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to compliance. "This facility is under federal investigation. You are interfering with government property." Jonathan Reeves stepped forward, his press credentials visible. Jonathan Reeves, Philadelphia Inquirer. "Can you state your name and authority for this action?" The agent's jaw tightened. "Special Agent Marcus Holland, Treasury Department Office of Inspector General. This building contains federal assets that are subject to seizure. These individuals are trespassing and tampering with evidence." "Evidence of what crime?" Caroline asked, moving to stand beside Maya. "My client owns this property legally. The deed is filed, taxes are current. We are documenting items found on our property. Items that were stolen from the United States, mint in 1969. Retained under quality assurance protocols," Caroline corrected. "We have documentation proving legitimate acquisition of every specimen in this vault. Authorization codes, supervisor signatures, production records. Everything your agency claimed was destroyed actually exists, preserved by a Mint employee operating within his legal authority." Holland's expression darkened. No Mint employee had authority to permanently retain government property. "These coins should have been destroyed." "Should have been, but weren't," Thomas Wu interjected. "And interestingly, the destruction orders you're referencing don't appear in Treasury Department records until 1972, 3 years after Mr. Torres retired, which suggests that at the time of retention, there was no specific order to destroy these specimens." The camera captured everything, The federal agents surrounded by news crews, the growing crowd of reporters at the top of the stairs, the crates of coins worth hundreds of millions sitting between two opposing forces. I'm ordering you to cease all activity and surrender any items you've removed from this vault, Holland said. Maya found her voice, surprised by its steadiness. I haven't removed anything except 3 specimens that are currently being authenticated by certified graders. Those specimens, which are documented in my grandfather's journal with proper authorization codes, are being held in a secure facility pending legal resolution. Then you admit to removing federal property. I admit to exercising my rights as property owner to have items authenticated that I discovered on my property. Items my grandfather legally retained 50 years ago under protocols your own agency established. Holland stepped closer, lowering his voice though the cameras could still hear. Ms. Torres, you're making a serious mistake. These coins are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you really think the government is going to let a dental receptionist walk away with that kind of money? Do you think your little press conference and your lawyers' arguments are going to stop us from taking what belongs to the American people? The American people, Maya said, feeling anger cut through her fear, deserve to know that their government lied about destroying rare coins so they could control the narrative about what exists and what doesn't. My grandfather documented the truth. I'm just making sure it sees the light. The standoff stretched, silence broken only by camera shutters and the distant sound of more vehicles arriving outside. Then Holland's radio crackled with a message too quiet for Maya to hear. His expression shifted, frustration replacing confidence. We're not done here, he said finally. Consider yourselves notified that this property and all its contents are under federal investigation. Any further interference will result in criminal charges. He turned and climbed the stairs, his team following. But Maya could see it in his retreat. They had lost this round. The cameras had captured everything. The federal agents confronting a single mother in a basement full of historical artifacts. The heavy-handed approach to what should have been a matter for civil courts. As the agents disappeared, Caroline's phone buzzed. She checked it and smiled. The judge denied the government's emergency motion. The hearing is still scheduled for 2 p.m., but he indicated in his ruling that the government needs to prove federal ownership, not simply assert it, which means we have time to finish documentation. They worked through the morning with renewed urgency, cataloging every crate, photographing every coin, cross-referencing everything against Antonio's journal. Thomas Wu provided running commentary for the cameras, explaining the significance of each discovery, the rarity of the specimens, the historical importance of coins the government had claimed didn't exist. By noon, they had documented 847 individual coins or sets across 127 different authorization codes, exactly as Antonio's journal had recorded. James Rodriguez had compiled preliminary valuations, conservative estimates that still took Maya's breath away. Total collection value, assuming successful authentication and legal resolution, he said, reading from his tablet, ranges from a floor of $485 million to a ceiling of approximately $606 million. That's accounting for the gold double eagles at the high end and assuming we can prove clear ownership of disputed specimens. $600 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, disconnected from reality. Maya tried to imagine what that meant, tried to picture it as houses and education and security, but it remained beyond her comprehension. The hearing starts in 2 hours, Caroline said. We need to get to the courthouse. They sealed the vault, leaving 2 security guard Jonathan Reeves had hired to prevent anyone else from accessing it. The crowd outside the building had swollen to hundreds, reporters and curious citizens all wanting to see the place where a single mother had discovered hundreds of millions in hidden coins. Maya emerged to a wall of camera flashes and shouted questions. Jonathan guided her to a designated press area where microphones had been set up. Ms. Torres, what will you do with the money if you win? How does it feel to discover you're potentially worth $500 million? Do you think the government has a legitimate claim to the coins? Maya looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the moment her life had become public property. She thought about Sofia in school, unaware that her mother was fighting a battle that would determine their future. She thought about her grandmother, maintaining a worthless building for 38 years, trusting that someday the right person would claim what Antonio had preserved. My grandfather spent 17 years documenting American coinage history, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. He did it legally, under authorized protocols, because he believed some things were too important to destroy. The government chose bureaucratic convenience over historical preservation. My grandfather chose differently. I'm honoring his choice, not for the money, but because truth matters more than institutional embarrassment. The crowd erupted with more questions, but Caroline was already guiding Maya toward a waiting car. They had a hearing to attend, a judge to convince, and the full weight of the federal government to face down. The courtroom was packed. Every major news organization had representatives present, along with coin dealers, auction house executives, numismatic historians, and ordinary citizens who had followed the story and wanted to see justice served. The gallery hummed with anticipation, the energy of people who sensed they were witnessing something significant. Judge Sarah Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a reputation for fairness, tempered by intolerance for nonsense. She had reviewed the preliminary briefs from both sides and seemed unimpressed by the government's arguments. The Treasury Department's attorney was a man named Richard Stiles, senior counsel with decades of experience in asset seizure cases. He presented the government's position with practiced confidence. The coins were federal property struck by a federal facility, never legally monetized, retained without proper authorization, and subject to immediate return to federal custody. Your Honor, Stiles argued, quality assurance protocols do not grant permanent ownership. They authorize temporary retention for evaluation purposes only. When the Philadelphia branch mint closed in 1969, all retained specimens should have been returned to federal custody or destroyed. Mr. Torres's decision to hide them in a sealed vault rather than surrender them constitutes theft of government property, regardless of his intentions or documentation. Caroline Shun stood, her response calm and devastating. Your Honor, the government's position requires accepting several premises that their own records contradict. First, they claim quality assurance retention was temporary only, but Treasury Department regulations from the 1950s and 60s provide no specific time frame for such retention. Second, they claim Mr. Torres should have returned the specimens when the mint closed, but official closure procedures made no mention of quality assurance samples, focusing exclusively on production equipment and unfinished materials. Third, and most significantly, the destruction orders they reference weren't issued until 1972, 3 years after Mr. Torres retired, which means at the time he sealed this collection, there was no directive requiring its destruction. She laid out Antonio's journal, the authorization codes visible under the courtroom's lights. Every coin in this collection is cross-referenced to official mint production codes. Many bear the signatures of mint supervisors authorizing retention. The government destroyed their copies of these records, assuming no one would ever question their claim that certain coins didn't exist. But my client's grandfather preserved not just the coins, but proof of their legitimate origin. Judge Morrison leaned forward, examining the journal pages Caroline had submitted as evidence. Mr. Stiles, do you have documentation contradicting these authorization codes? Stiles hesitated, the first crack in his confidence. Your Honor, many mint records from that era were destroyed in accordance with standard retention policies. How convenient, Morrison said dryly. So the government destroyed the very records that would prove or disprove Mr. Torres's documentation, and now wants this court to simply accept their assertion that he acted improperly? Your Honor, the burden of proof should be on the claimant to demonstrate legitimate ownership. In a criminal case, perhaps, but you brought a civil asset forfeiture action, Mr. Stiles, which means the burden is on you to prove these coins are federal property subject to seizure. Ms. Chun has presented contemporaneous documentation from a federal employee showing authorized retention. Can you present any evidence that his authorizations were invalid or that he exceeded his authority? The silence from the government's table spoke volumes. Morrison continued. Furthermore, I'm troubled by the timing here. Ms. Torres's grandmother owned this property for 38 years. Why wasn't this collection discovered and seized during any of those decades? Why did the government only become interested after the property transferred to Ms. Torres and she began documenting its contents? We were unaware of the collection's existence, Stiles admitted. So the government lost track of hundreds of millions of dollars in allegedly federal property for half a century, and now wants to punish a citizen who discovered it? That seems to be rewarding government negligence while penalizing private diligence. Maya watched the judge systematically dismantle the government's arguments, feeling hope build in her chest. This was happening. She was actually winning. Morrison issued her ruling from a bench. Unusual in complex cases, but a sign of how clearly she saw the issues. The government's motion for immediate seizure is denied. Ms. Torres has presented substantial evidence of legitimate acquisition through quality assurance protocols. The authorization codes in Mr. Torres's documentation appear authentic and correspond to known mint production codes. Without contradicting evidence from the government, this court cannot conclude that the retention was improper. The government may pursue its claims through normal civil procedures, but absent proof of theft or fraud, these coins remain the property of Ms. Torres's estate. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for exits to file their stories. Caroline gripped Maya's hand, her professional composure cracking into a genuine smile. Across the aisle, Richard Stiles gathered his papers with tight-lipped frustration, already on his phone reporting the loss to his superiors. But Morrison wasn't finished. However, she continued, and the room fell silent, I am ordering that the coins remain in secure storage, pending authentication and formal appraisal. Ms. Torres, you will work with the court to identify a neutral facility that can house the collection while certified graders examine each specimen. This process will likely take months. Do you understand? Maya stood, her legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Outside the courthouse, the press conference was chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras jostled for position, and Maya found herself at the center of attention that felt both exhilarating and overwhelming. How does it feel to win against the federal government? What will you do with $600 million? Do you think your grandfather would be proud? Maya thought about that last question, really thought about it. Would Antonio Torres be proud? He had spent 17 years carefully documenting every coin, every authorization, every detail that would allow someone to prove the collection's legitimacy. He had sealed it away, trusting that someday the right person would find it and have the courage to bring it into the light. My grandfather believed truth was worth preserving, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. He believed some things were too important to destroy, even when powerful people wanted them erased. I think he'd be proud that his documentation proved strong enough to stand against those same institutions 50 years later. But more than that, I think he'd be proud that his granddaughter didn't give up when it got hard. That soundbite played on every news network that evening. The image of a dental receptionist who worked night shifts at a hospital standing up to the federal government and winning. The story captured something people needed to believe, that ordinary people could still fight power and prevail, that truth still mattered, that justice was still possible. But Maya's victory celebration was interrupted by a call that reminded her the fight wasn't entirely over. Maya, it's Derek. Her ex-husband's voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. About what? About Sofia. About custody arrangements. About the fact that you're about to come into a substantial fortune and how that changes things. Maya's blood went cold. You want money. I want what's best for my daughter. I'm prepared to seek joint custody, but I'm also open to discussing financial arrangements that would be in Sofia's best interests. Translation: pay me, or I'll tie you up in custody court for years. Maya recognized the calculation in his voice, the same cold assessment of value he probably used with investment clients. Derek, you haven't seen Sofia in 4 months. You haven't paid child support in 3. Now that there's money involved, suddenly you care about custody? I care about making sure Sofia's mother doesn't make impulsive decisions that could harm her future. Judges look unfavorably on parents who prioritize treasure hunting over stability. Judges also look unfavorably on parents who abandon their children until it becomes financially advantageous to return. My lawyer will be in touch regarding your back child support. And Derek? Don't contact me again except through legal counsel. She ended the call, hands shaking with rage. Caroline, who had been listening, put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He's posturing. His position is terrible. Abandonment, failure to pay support, sudden interest coinciding with financial windfall. No judge will take that seriously. But he'll try anyway, because that's who he is. Let him try. You've just beaten the federal government. I think we can handle one deadbeat ex-husband. The authentication process took 3 months. The court approved a secure facility in Philadelphia, a climate-controlled vault with 24-hour security where certified numismatic graders from 3 different agencies examined every coin in Antonio's collection. Thomas Wu supervised the process, ensuring academic integrity while the world's top coin experts verified what Maya's grandfather had preserved. The 1933 double eagles were authenticated as genuine mint strikes, their documentation so thorough that even the Secret Service, which had historically seized all such coins on site, acknowledged they were legally distinct from previously discovered specimens. Each one received a grade of MS 65 or higher, placing them among the finest examples of the most beautiful American coin ever struck. The 1964 peace dollars were confirmed as legitimate mint products, struck during an authorized production run that was supposed to be completely melted. Antonio's documentation showed he had retained quality control samples before the melt order was executed, making them legal under the strict interpretation Caroline had argued. Coin after coin, set after set, the authentication reports came back confirming what Antonio's journal had claimed. And with each confirmation, the valuation climbed. James Rodriguez updated his estimates weekly, watching the numbers grow as grading results exceeded expectations. By the time the final specimen was authenticated, he had a number that made Maya's head spin. Total certified value, $606.3 million, he said, showing her the detailed breakdown. That's accounting for auction premiums, dealer commissions, and assuming orderly liquidation over several years to prevent market saturation. If you try to sell everything at once, the value would be lower. If you're patient and strategic, it could go higher. $600 million. Not a rough estimate anymore, but a certified number backed by the world's leading numismatic experts. Maya sat in Caroline's office, staring at the authentication reports, trying to comprehend that her life had fundamentally changed. She would never work another night shift. Sofia would never worry about college tuition. They would never struggle with rent or utilities or any of the 1,000 small emergencies that had defined their existence. You need to start thinking about what comes next, Caroline said gently. Estate planning, investment strategy, security measures. This kind of wealth requires professional management. I need to think about Sofia, Maya corrected. About what this means for her. About whether we stay in Camden or move somewhere safer. About whether she can handle this becoming public knowledge at her school. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. She's 8 years old. Her mother just became one of the wealthiest women in America because her great-grandfather hid coins in a basement. That's a lot for anyone to process, let alone a third grader. Maya had told Sofia about the coins in careful increments, age-appropriate explanations that emphasized family history over financial value. Sofia understood that her great-great-grandfather had worked at a place that made money and that he'd saved special coins that were now very valuable. She didn't fully grasp what $606 million meant, but she understood it was enough to mean they didn't have to worry anymore. The first auction was scheduled for 6 months after authentication, giving the major auction houses time to prepare and the coin-collecting world time to gather resources. Maya worked with Sotheby's and Heritage Auctions to create a strategy that would maximize value while respecting the historical significance of the collection. Some coins would go to museums under long-term loan agreements. Others would be sold to serious collectors who understood the responsibility of owning such rare specimens. The 1933 double eagles would be auctioned individually, each one a separate event that would draw global attention. But before any of that, Maya had one more piece of business to handle. She invited Derek to meet her at Marcus Webb's jewelry shop, neutral ground where she felt safe. He arrived in his BMW, wearing an expensive suit, still carrying himself with the confidence of someone who expected to get what he wanted. "Maya," he said, his tone carefully calibrated to sound reasonable. "I'm glad you agreed to meet. I think we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone." "I'm not here to negotiate," Maya said. "I'm here to make something clear. You abandoned Sofia. You stopped paying child support. You only returned when you thought there was money to be gained. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. I made mistakes, but I'm her father. She needs me in her life. She needed you when I was working 2 jobs to keep us fed. She needed you when she cried because her classmates asked why her dad never came to school events. She needed you for 3 years, and you were too busy with your new life to care." Derek's expression hardened. "You're going to regret this when your lawyers will receive a check for the back child support you owe, plus interest," Maya interrupted. "After that, if you want to petition for visitation rights, you can do so through the court like any other non-custodial parent. But I'm not giving you money to go away, and I'm not negotiating custody with someone who only became interested when there was a fortune involved." She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it on the table between them. "That's a check for $47,892. The exact amount you owe in child support plus legal interest. Your lawyer will receive it tomorrow along with a formal settlement of all financial claims between us." Derek stared at the envelope. "You think you're better than me now because you inherited some coins." "No, Derek, I think I'm stronger than you gave me credit for. I always was. I just needed to prove it to myself." She left him sitting there and walked out into the spring sunshine, feeling lighter than she had in years. Her ex-husband, the mysterious consortium, the federal government, everyone who had tried to intimidate her or by her silence or take what her grandfather had preserved, they had all underestimated her. And she had proven them wrong. The first auction took place on a crisp October evening at Sotheby's in New York City. The lots included 10 of the 1960 four-piece dollars, 5 1933 double eagles, and a selection of the experimental coins that had never been available to collectors. The room was packed with wealthy bidders, museum representatives, and coin dealers who had waited their entire careers for an opportunity like this. Maya attended with Sofia, both of them dressed in new clothes that fit properly, that looked like what they were, expensive. But Maya had resisted the urge to go overboard. They weren't different people just because they had money. They were still themselves, just with better security. The bidding was fierce and fast. The first 1964-piece dollar opened at $500,000 and climbed to $1.2 million before the hammer fell. The 1933 double eagles each exceeded $8 million, breaking records and drawing gasps from the crowd. By the end of the evening, the 10 lots had brought in $67.3 million. And that was just the beginning. Over the next year, additional auctions would place the rest of the collection, each one carefully timed and curated to maximize value and historical impact. But perhaps the most significant moment came not at an auction, but at a small ceremony in Philadelphia where Maya donated Antonio's journal to the Smithsonian Institution. The journal would be displayed alongside select coins from the collection, telling the story of a mint engraver who believed preservation mattered more than convenience. "My grandfather documented everything because he believed truth shouldn't be erased," Maya said at the dedication ceremony. "He preserved these coins not for personal gain, but because they represented American history, craftsmanship, and innovation that deserved to exist. I'm honored to share his work with the world." Thomas Wu, standing beside the display case containing the journal, added his perspective. Antonio Torres performed one of the most significant acts of numismatic preservation in American history. Because of his diligence and his granddaughter's courage, we now know that coins we thought were lost forever actually exist. This discovery has rewritten our understanding of 20th century American coinage. The ceremony concluded with Maya placing the first coin in the museum's collection, a 1943 copper penny that her grandfather had retained as a metallurgical sample. It would sit forever behind glass, proof that one man's decision to preserve rather than destroy could matter 50 years later. Sofia tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, do you think great-great-grandpa Antonio knows what you did?" Maya knelt beside her daughter, looking into eyes that held Antonio's determination and her own resilience. "I think he does, sweetie. I think he knew all along that someone in our family would be strong enough to finish what he started." "Are we rich now?" Maya smiled. "We're comfortable. We're secure. But more importantly, we're free. Free from worry. Free from fear. Free to choose what we want to do with our lives instead of just surviving day to day." "What do you want to do?" It was a question Maya had been asking herself for months. The money was real now, invested and managed by professionals who ensured it would last for generations. She had bought a modest house in a safe neighborhood. Nothing ostentatious, just a real home with a yard where Sofia could play. She had established trust for Sofia's education and future. She had donated significantly to causes she believed in, including a foundation supporting single mothers. But what did she want to do? Not for money, but for purpose? "I want to go back to school," Maya said slowly, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. "I want to study history, maybe become a curator or archivist. I want to help preserve other people's stories the way your great-great-grandfather preserved these coins." Sofia nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. "You should do that, Mom. You're good at figuring out important stuff." And so she did. Maya enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania, pursuing a degree in museum studies while maintaining her duties as guardian of Antonio's legacy. She established the Torres Foundation for Historical Preservation, funding projects to save endangered documents and artifacts. She became a vocal advocate for transparency in government records and the importance of preserving materials that institutions might prefer to destroy. The money changed her circumstances, but the fight to claim it changed who she was. She was no longer the woman who accepted Derek's condescension, or who apologized for taking up space, or who believed she wasn't equipped to handle complex challenges. She was someone who had faced the federal government and won, who had turned a worthless inheritance into a fortune, who had honored her grandfather's courage with courage of her own. 2 years after the first auction, Maya stood in the Mint building on Moyamensing Avenue one last time. The property had been sold to a developer who was converting it into luxury apartments, preserving the historical facade while creating modern living spaces. The basement where Antonio's vault had stood would become a wine cellar for the building's residents. The sealed room transformed into storage for expensive bottles rather than priceless coins. But a plaque near the entrance would commemorate what had happened here, the discovery that had shocked the numismatic world and proved that truth, carefully documented and patiently preserved, could survive half a century of institutional denial. "Goodbye, Grandpa," Maya whispered to the empty building, to the spirit of a man she had never known but who had changed her life anyway. "Thank you for believing someone would be strong enough." She locked the building for the final time and walked out into the Philadelphia sunshine, where Sofia waited in the car, doing homework with the casual ease of a child who had never known true financial stress. They would go home, their real home, and have dinner together without Maya needing to rush off to a night shift. They would watch a movie and read before bed, and wake up tomorrow without the weight of survival pressing down on them. The coins were scattered now, in museums and private collections around the world, each one carrying Antonio's story with it. The journal was preserved at the Smithsonian, available to researchers and historians who would study it for generations. And the Torres family, Maya and Sofia and whoever came after them, would carry forward the legacy of courage and preservation that Antonio had begun. Maya had been a dental receptionist who cleaned hospital rooms at night. Now she was a graduate student, a philanthropist, an advocate for historical preservation, and a single mother who had proven that ordinary people could still defeat extraordinary challenges. But more than any of that, she was Antonio Torres's granddaughter, strong enough to carry his burden, brave enough to bring his truth into the light, and wise enough to know that some inheritances have nothing to do with money. The real inheritance, the one that mattered most, was the belief that she was capable of more than anyone, including herself, had imagined. And that belief, carefully preserved and patiently waiting, had proven worth more than all the coins in the world. As she drove home through the city streets, past the neighborhoods where she'd once struggled and the places that had witnessed her transformation, Maya thought about her grandmother's letter. "You have courage, Maya. I saw it in your eyes when you were just a girl." Margaret had been right. The courage had always been there, waiting like Antonio's coins in a sealed room, just needing the right moment and the right circumstances to emerge. And when it did, it changed everything. Sofia looked up from her homework. "Mom, I have to write about someone I admire for school. Can I write about great-great-grandpa Antonio?" "Of course you can, sweetie. And about you. Because you found what he hid, and you didn't let the mean people take it away." Maya's throat tightened with emotion. "You can write about whoever you want. I want to write about strong people in my family. That's you and great-great-grandpa Antonio. You're both strong in the same way." And in that moment, driving through Philadelphia with her daughter beside her and the memory of Antonio's courage behind her, Maya understood what her grandfather had really preserved. Not just coins, but the proof that ordinary people, doing difficult things for the right reasons, could change the world. The mint ruins on Moyamensing Avenue would become apartments. The coins would find new homes and collections across the globe. But the story, the real inheritance, would continue through Sofia and whoever came after her, passed down like Antonio's journal, a record of courage that refused to be erased. And somewhere in memory or heaven or the eternal space where truth lives forever, Antonio Torres smiled at his granddaughter, who had proven strong enough to carry his legacy into the light, just as he had always believed she would be. 5 years after the discovery, Maya stood in the Grand Hall of the Philadelphia Mint Museum, a building that had opened just months earlier. The museum occupied a renovated historical structure 3 blocks from where Antonio had worked, dedicated to telling the complete story of American coinage, including the chapters that institutions had once preferred to keep hidden. Sofia, now 13, stood beside her, taller and more confident, wearing the chess queen pendant that Maya had commissioned for Marcus Webb, a perfect replica of the one Antonio had worn under his shirt every day of his operational life. It had become a tradition in their family, passed from Maya to her daughter on Sofia's 12th birthday, along with the story of the man who had believed preservation mattered more than compliance. "Are you nervous?" Sofia asked, squeezing her mother's hand. Maya smiled. "A little. Public speaking never gets easier, even when you've done it 100 times. You face down federal agents and auction houses full of millionaires. I think you can handle dedicating a museum wing." The Torres Wing was Maya's largest single philanthropic project, a $40 million contribution that had funded the museum's entire educational section. Inside, interactive displays taught children about coin production, metallurgy, and numismatic history. But the centerpiece was something else entirely, a permanent exhibition called Truth in Metal, the Antonio Torres Collection. The exhibition displayed 50 coins from the original collection that Maya had donated rather than sold, specimens chosen for their educational value rather than monetary worth. Each one was accompanied by pages from Antonio's journal, his precise handwriting explaining the authorization codes, the production circumstances, the reasons for retention. It was a masterclass in documentation, in the power of careful record-keeping to preserve truth across decades. But what made the exhibition extraordinary was its honesty. Unlike traditional museum displays that presented sanitized institutional history, this one acknowledged the conflict, the government's attempt to suppress the collection's existence, the legal battle Maya had fought to claim her inheritance. It presented numismatic history as what it truly was, a story of human decisions, institutional pressures, and occasional courage in the face of convenience. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people, coin collectors and historians, city officials and museum directors, and a surprising number of ordinary citizens who had followed Maya's story and wanted to witness this conclusion. The mayor was there, along with representatives from the Smithsonian. Thomas Wu had flown in from a conference in London specifically for this event. Marcus Webb sat in the front row, now 82 but still sharp-eyed and steady-handed. And in the back, trying to be inconspicuous but failing, was a figure Maya recognized with a start: Special Agent Marcus Holland, the Treasury Department official who had confronted her in the Mint basement 5 years ago. He had retired from government service 2 years earlier, and Maya had heard through Thomas Wu that he had become something of an advocate for transparency in federal records management, using her case as an example of why institutional secrecy often backfired. Maya approached the podium as the crowd settled. She had written remarks, but standing here now, she set them aside and spoke from her heart. 5 years ago, I was a dental receptionist working 2 jobs to support my daughter. I inherited what I thought was a worthless building from a grandmother I barely knew. I was exhausted, broke, and convinced that life had already shown me my limits. She paused, feeling the weight of memory. I was wrong about all of it. The building wasn't worthless. My grandmother knew exactly what she was leaving me, and my limits were so much further than I'd ever imagined. The audience was silent, attentive. Sofia watched with pride evident on her young face. My grandfather, Antonio Torres, worked in the Philadelphia branch mint for 17 years. He was a die engraver, an artist in metal, someone who understood that coins are more than currency, their history made tangible. When his supervisors ordered experimental specimens destroyed, he followed procedure, but he also believed some things were too valuable to erase. So he documented everything, retained samples under legitimate protocols, and preserved them for a future he wouldn't live to see. Maya gestured to the exhibition behind her. These coins represent more than monetary value. They represent a choice Antonio made every day for 17 years. The choice to preserve truth even when institutions preferred deletion. He couldn't have known his granddaughter would find them. He couldn't have known I would fight to claim them. But he prepared for that possibility anyway, with documentation so thorough that 50 years later, it could withstand legal challenges from the most powerful government in the world. She saw Holland shift uncomfortably in his seat, but there was no malice in her words, only acknowledgement of what had happened. I learned something from my grandfather's legacy. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite fear, because something matters more than comfort or safety or institutional approval. Antonio acted with that courage every time he wrote an authorization code in his journal. My grandmother acted with it when she maintained a condemned building for 38 years without accessing what was inside, trusting that the right person would eventually come. Maya's voice caught slightly, and I had to find that courage when federal agents told me to surrender what I'd found, when my ex-husband tried to use our daughter to pressure me, when financial consortiums offer me millions to hide the truth. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about Antonio, sitting at his workbench, carefully documenting another specimen, preserving another piece of truth. If he could do it for 17 years, I could do it for a few months. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Maya waited for it to subside. This museum wing isn't just about coins. It's about the power of ordinary people to preserve truth when institutions won't. It's about documentation defeating denial. It's about believing that what we protect today might matter to someone we'll never meet in a future we can't imagine. She looked directly at Sofia. And it's about passing that belief forward, making sure the next generation understands that they're stronger than they know, braver than they believe, and capable of extraordinary things if they're willing to try. She concluded with words Antonio had written in his final journal entry, words that now appeared on a bronze plaque at the exhibition entrance. I do this not for personal gain, but because I believe history should not be erased to serve bureaucratic convenience. If you are reading this, I hope you use this collection wisely. Grandpa, Maya said softly, we did. We used it to tell your story, to preserve your truth, and to prove that courage, carefully documented and patiently preserved, can survive anything. The ceremony concluded with the ribbon cutting, Sofia wielding the oversized scissors while cameras captured the moment. The Torres wing opened to the public, and Maya watched families stream inside, children pressing close to the display cases, parents reading Antonio's journal entries aloud, everyone engaging with history that had almost been buried forever. Later, as the crowd thinned, Marcus Holland approached Maya. He looked older, the confidence that had armored him during their confrontation replaced by something more humble. "Ms. Torres," he said formally, "I wanted to apologize. I was following orders, but that doesn't excuse the intimidation tactics. You were right. Your grandfather was right. Some things are too important to destroy." Maya studied him, seeing genuine regret. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit being wrong, especially about something you fought so hard to defend." "I spent 30 years protecting institutional interests," Holland said. "Retirement gave me perspective on what I was actually protecting, not truth or justice, but the government's preference for controlling narratives. Your grandfather threatened that control by preserving evidence they wanted erased. You threatened it by refusing to be intimidated. You both deserved better than what my agency gave you." They shook hands, and Maya felt something release, a final piece of anger she'd been carrying. Holland wasn't the enemy. He'd been a tool of institutional inertia, just as she'd been a dental receptionist who could have taken the easy money and walked away. They'd both made choices, his to serve the institution, hers to serve the truth. History would judge which choice mattered more. As evening fell and the museum prepared to close, Maya and Sofia stood alone in the Torres wing, surrounded by Antonio's legacy made visible. 50 coins gleamed under museum lighting, each one a small rebellion against erasure, each one proof that one person's documentation could outlast institutional denial. "Mom," Sofia said quietly, "do you think there are other Antonio Torreses out there? Other people who've preserved things that powerful people want hidden?" Maya smiled. "I'm certain of it. And maybe someday, someone will find what they preserved. Someone who's scared and uncertain, but brave enough to bring it into the light anyway. Like you did. Like your great-great-grandfather taught us to do." They left the museum as night settled over Philadelphia, the city lights reflecting off the building's glass facade. Somewhere in this city, Antonio had worked his shifts at the Mint, carefully documenting specimens, believing that truth deferred was not truth denied, only truth waiting for courage. Somewhere in these streets, Margaret had lived her quiet life, maintaining a worthless building, trusting that her granddaughter possessed strength she didn't yet recognize. And now, 5 years after a single mother had opened a condemned building and discovered her grandfather's gift, that truth shone in a museum for the world to see, preserved not in secret vaults, but in public exhibitions where it belonged. Maya drove home through familiar streets, past the Camden neighborhoods where she'd struggled, past the Philadelphia corners where she'd fought her battles. The journey had transformed her, but it hadn't changed who she fundamentally was, just revealed it. She was still the woman who valued truth over convenience, courage over comfort, preservation over erasure. She was Antonio Torres's granddaughter, and she had proven worthy of his trust. And that inheritance, that legacy of courage carefully preserved and wisely used, was worth more than all the coins in the world.